Very good
Good
to
to go
start.
when you are.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Right. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody, to this meeting of the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee. Really delighted to have everybody with us on the call today. I am advised that should our technology fail for whatever reason, should my technology fail for whatever reason, and should I drop off, Pauline has very kindly agreed to step in and chair the meeting until I get reconnected, but hopefully that won't be necessary, but we have a contingency. So I've been advised of no apologies. And I also just would like to note that this is Brian Sawar's first meeting as an ARAC member, as an ARAC committee member. So Brian, you're very welcome. It's good to have you with us. I have been, yes, as I say, I've been advised of no apologies and no declarations have been notified in advance, but can I just please confirm for the minute that there are no declarations of interest in relation to the items on the agenda today? And I can see no hands up, so I take that as confirmed. So the next agenda item we have is the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee minute from the meeting held on the 12th of February 2026. And can I please invite members to approve that as an accurate record of the meeting? And again, I see no dissent, so I think we are content to approve. That's perfect. Then the next one, we've got the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee action log review and matters arising, and I note that there are, I believe, 2 actions which are both proposed for closure. Are members content with that? Yeah, perfect. I see thumbs up and nodding. That's great. Okay, thank you. And then we need to make a decision to take business in private for the items 7 to 10, and that is in accordance with section 20 of our standing order. So can I please invite members to confirm that you're happy to take those agenda items in private? Yeah, okay, very good. Thumbs up again. Good going so far. Right, okay, so that's the preliminaries out of the way. So without any further ado, we are straight into the audit and improvement progress section of our agenda. And the first item there is 2.1 internal audit update. And Claire Robertson, our BDO audit partner, I believe we are passing over to yourself on that. Do we have Claire with us from BDO? I probably should have checked that at the start of the meeting.
She was with us, Chair. She's maybe just dropped.
Right.
Off. No,
okay.
she's here. She's maybe just
Okay.
having some issues connecting.
Okay. Claire, is there any colleagues? Claire, I mean, otherwise we will just go to the next agenda item.
Yeah, Chair, I'd maybe move on to 2.2 and I'll just check.
Do we have Donna
if
with
Claire
us?
can get back on.
Yeah, okay, right. We will come back to 2.1. So moving on to 2.2, which is the Police Scotland Audit and Improvement Recommendations Tracker Q4. Donna, do we have you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Thank you. Right, I believe that's over to yourself for an introduction.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yes. So the purpose of the paper is to provide assurance to members how Police Scotland is progressing with the recommendations that we get from external scrutiny. It provides a consolidated breakdown of the open recommendations, a breakdown by risk and their progress. We focus quite a bit on the high risk recommendations and in particular those that have not been met this quarter. And we've added a breakdown of the recommendations by scrutiny body following your request at the last meeting. So whilst the number of recommendations open remains quite high, there's been really good progress together with implementation, and we've achieved quite a lot of closures this quarter. Sorry, can you hear me? I'm getting quite a lot of feedback. And we provide details of the closures at Appendix A so that you can see the improvements and the risks that have been reduced as a result of those closures. However, we do still have a lot of recommendations that are missing their original target date. And that has been a position, as you know, for quite a while. What I want to assure members is that whilst you just see the static numbers, I am seeing quite steady progress with those. So it's not always the same recommendations, although it doesn't maybe appear to be the case when I present the figures to you. When my team are reviewing all of these recommendations, why they're delayed, we carry out deep dives, we escalate them through our governance structure at every level, from our divisional commanders right up to our own audit and risk board, and we present the reasons why they've been delayed, along with any implications for risk. And I have summarised those, the reasons why they're delayed and the risks that haven't been met this quarter at starting at paragraph 113. There's a variety of reasons why they're delayed. We know that we have dependencies with external partners. We have a lot of dependencies with technology, new technology that's being introduced, and we've got to wait for that to take place before we can then realise the benefit. We've got some training rollout programs that we're dependent on, policy development, and wider organisational change, so that we're making a bigger change and showing a wider improvement. What we have done in the last month is we've added some categorisation to our recording system so that we can record the reason for the delay, and we'll be able to present that information more accurately going forward. And that perhaps will give some better assurance that things are not being delayed because there's no activity taking place in that area. There are good reasons why things are taking a little bit longer. And we possibly are not so good at setting realistic target dates in the first place. There's a variety of reasons why that is. Sometimes our understanding of what is required when we're improvement planning, it's not until you get into it that you realise we could do this, we could do the next thing, and it takes a little bit longer. Some recommendations need a phased implementation, so we'll do this part and then we'll have a better understanding, we'll move to the next part, and that therefore requires some phasing. And there's the external dependencies as well. We're not always in control of completing the action without the assistance of our partners. So I think that's probably all I would like to say.
Okay, thank you very much for this, Donna. And I acknowledge the fact that this is in a different format, I believe, to what we've seen before. So I appreciate the fact that you've acted on our feedback and presented us with presented the data differently, presented us with a bit more detail on this as well. I think that's absolutely good, and it's helpful to kind of hear your narrative, your voiceover with the report as well, in terms of you're seeing movement, you're seeing that things have been quite practically managed. And I think for me, this is a little bit of this is a tale of two kind of, there's two different perspectives here. I certainly feel that the presentation of data around the recommendations and the presentation of how they're being managed internally through to kind of completion, that has certainly improved since last year. But at the same time, I think we absolutely have to, we have to have a look at the numbers as well. And I think that is a separate, that is almost a separate issue entirely. So there's the management of the recommendations, and then there's the completion of the recommendations. And I think, it is a bit of a thread throughout several of the agenda items that we have on our agenda today. So I know that members are quite keen to kind of delve into that. But before, we do that, I see, Tom, you've got your hand up. So I would let you come in, please, Tom.
Chair, thank you very much. It was really just to build on Donna's comments. Myself and DCC Spears have had a number of conversations over the months, and I'm grateful for the feedback you've given today about the reporting. To give you reassurance, and we have talked about this before, the accountability is absolutely the heart of governance. We're bringing a new internal governance framework to our strategic leadership board next week, and it's emphasising the the central role of audit and scrutiny, and the importance at the point at which we adopt and agree recommendations to accept them, and that we commit to timescales, that those are monitored. The Chief's pushing very hard on stepping up the improvement of our internal performance monitoring and reporting. This is a feature of it. We will also have a standalone part of future SLB discussions that's about progress in this area. Donna and the team, as you all are aware, do an extensive job. They're engaged across the organisation, and we're trying to step up the level of that work, and I think we're starting to see some impact. I know the numbers are still not great, and we're going to come on obviously to talk about the overall audit view that's been taken, but it was really just to give you some assurance, Chair, that we've put this right at the centre of governance, and it's given it a status arguably it maybe hasn't had in the past. So I'm hoping we can start to see that flow through to these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And it is encouraging to hear that you've acknowledged this, and that there is changes that are underway. So it's good to know that, as I say. I think we will need to see how quickly this will be stood up, and how quickly it will start showing some of the desired impacts, i.e., the reduction in outstanding recommendations. But I think between a target future state and where we're now, I think we need to possibly see what additional assurance, or what additional assurance we require, and what additional support we can provide as well. So I would like to open it up to members, I think, at this stage, because, as I say, I know colleagues will have comments and questions. So I had Brian first, and then Pauline, and then Angela.
Thank you very much, Chair. My questions are probably a bit of detail, and they sort of tie together the previous item, which we didn't actually cover, which is 2.1 and 2.2. Now, I know that 2.2 contains all of the recommendations from scrutiny bodies and from internal audit, and 2.1 is just internal audit. One of the things that struck me comparing the two is that if you work out the average rate of implementation in the internal audit reports, there's about 19 recommendations getting solved every quarter, but there are about 155 average recs. So it takes about 2 years to go through those recommendations on the internal audit side. Now, on paper 2.2, which is the much wider, includes the scrutiny bodies, that average is about a year. I just wondered if there was a view on why there's a difference, why the ability to go through recommendations on the internal audit reporting side seems poorer, twice as poor as it is for others. Also, I noticed when I was doing that, there was quite a significant drop in internal audit recommendations that had been exercised in the last quarter. I think typically it's about 19 a quarter. Last quarter it was only 6. So if there's any comments on why that might have dropped off. I was also interested in some of the very oldest recommendations as well. One of them relates to the SPA annual audit of 21-22. I just was interested to know what that recommendation is about that's so long ago from an annual audit cycle. And very last, it's probably an observation that probably would draw a comment perhaps, is I do wonder whether it would be useful for the committee to have officers involved in the areas that perhaps are taking the hardest or longest time to discharge, whether it might be useful to have them come to the committee so we can understand a bit more about those dependencies that might be leading to delays, whether it's partners or technology, I think were the main things mentioned. So sorry, that's about 4 questions at once. I'll shut up there.
Thank you, Brian. Right, who's gonna start answering some of those? I had both Sarah and Tom who would like to come in.
Sarah, do you want to go first? Thank you, Chair.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Brian, thank you for your question. I will let Tom answer the majority of them, but I think I can give you an answer for the specific audit 2021 recommendation, because I asked the exact same question in our internal audit and risk board. And as far as I understand it, it relates to benefit realization and mapping of benefits realization, and it is also linked into recommendation 6 from our best value report that's been issued. So for me, we are progressing that, and that has been worked on. I think it is a historical clearing within the system within 4 action, because it hadn't been raised to my attention. So as far as I'm aware, it's around benefits realization, and it is being cleared with the work that Rita has been doing around mapping that which we've seen through resources committee, but also it will also be topped up through the best value recommendation. I don't know, Donna, if you have anything more on that, but that's my understanding of that aged audit recommendation. It's not something that is concerning me, but that's the detail I know.
Okay, thank you. Tom, do you want to come in? You're on mute, Tom.
Sorry, Chair, my apologies.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, in response to your questions, again, to build on Sarah's point, you're right to call out the difference in the pace of implementation. That's something that myself, Donna, and the team are pushing through our internal audit and risk board. Deb Spears chairs that every quarter. I chaired the last one, and it was very much about the kind of accountability that you've described. I think we would be open, absolutely, where there are particular executive leads where recommendations have not been implemented at sufficient pace. It's legitimate with the Chief Constable's commitment to enhanced accountability that there would be attendance at this meeting to come along and explain what the context is and why the delay. But to give you some assurance, that's exactly the conversation that we're having internally. I know you had raised other points. I know Sarah's covered one of them there, but Donna will probably have a perspective as well on some of the maybe cultural issues I would probably point to that there perhaps has been and that we're now tackling and addressing through our internal governance that I touched on earlier. But Donna, did you want to maybe come in just with your reflections? Thank you.
Okay, just in relation to the drop-off this quarter, we did present more for closure, but there were a high number that we knew that we were not going to meet the timescales because our review activity had indicated that actually they were bigger pieces of work, and a lot of those recommendations were in the health and safety space and the production space. So when we did our review, we looked at what activity was ongoing, what was already completed, but we just took the decision we were not going to be able to meet the time this quarter, so we took the decision to defer them, knowing how much work is now involved in making those changes. But there's certainly, it's not a case that they've been sitting there with no activity. There's been quite a lot of activity. And in that, the difference between the internal audit, there has been a slowdown. We're still closing, in my opinion, high numbers of internal audit recommendations. We had 98 for the whole of last financial year that we closed. That's 98 improvements that we've made, or risks that's been reduced, and that was an increase in the year before. We do know that we perhaps need to get better at closing first time. So when we present recommendations for closure, we need to make sure that the quality of the closing statement and the supporting evidence is good enough that BDO can understand and see the changes that have taken place. So I've made a commitment that we'll focus on that in the next quarter and see if we can do that, because BDO don't know all of our business. So when we're presenting the closing statements, we can't imply an understanding. We have to really make sure that it's extremely clear. And I think that's it. I don't think I want to say anything else.
Thank you. Brian, I think that is at least touched on your questions. I think, you know, I think there's an acknowledgement that yes, there has been a drop-off rate. But at the same time, there has been substantial amount of activity as well. Right. So let me, if there's no follow, Brian, if you don't want to come back in, I will move on to Pauline, please.
Thanks very much, and Donna, many thanks for taking on board the suggestions of the committee in terms of the enhancement of the report. Really, really useful, and I welcome the risk-focused approach, in particular around those outstanding recommendations. I've got one specific detail question about Appendix B, which shows the progress over time. I think that was one of the asks we had as a committee, really helpful. So specifically, the progress in biometrics and environmental management, they both look very slow progress. I'd be interested in what the key issues are around those specifically. And my wider question and observation is that despite all the good work to date that we've heard about today, and that there has been some real positive progress in terms of reducing those outstanding risks, nevertheless, the audit opinion has been informed by the current status, and I'd be interested in internal audit's view as to whether we are operating in a more risky environment, and what more do we need to do as an audit risk and assurance committee in terms of supporting the team to make progress so that we can reduce that risk and improve next year's and future years' audit opinions going forward.
Thank you, Pauline.
Okay, I'll come in and answer the first couple in relation to biometrics and environment. So in our last deep dive, the purpose of doing that Appendix B was so that we could have a look at areas where we think there's maybe been some slower progress or reasons why things are taking a bit longer. So biometrics did feature in that. There's been a huge amount of recommendations, not just from internal audit in the biometric space, but also the biometrics commissioner. There's been a new team that took a little bit longer to get in place than originally anticipated, and that team was not even in place at the time of the internal audit. So we were not starting right away with that work. So it's just taken a bit of time. There's a lot of work that is dependent on the strategy, which is going through the final phases of consultation, I think, with wider SPA board members and the public. So that is the reason why biometrics is taking a bit of time. In relation to the environment and sustainability, that audit was just published in October 25. There's long timescales attached to that. So I'm quite comfortable that I wouldn't expect to see any progress with the movement of those recommendations until we start reaching those milestones. So I'm quite comfortable with that. They've not been on there long enough for us to act on any of the recommendations, but there will be progress being made in the background. Leave the internal audit question to Claire, or?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, as you rightly said, our internal audit opinion this year is informed partly by the number of limited assurance reports that we've produced, but also the implementation rate of the recommendations. So had there been like quicker implementation of some of the higher risk recommendations, that would have definitely helped with our overall opinion being a bit more positive. So we would hope to see that improve as time goes on, and as we close off some of those higher and more moderate risk areas to increase the overall level of assurance that we're able to give. In terms of what can be done to better support the implementation rate, I think Tom had some comments on that already and is probably a better place to answer that part of your question.
Thank you, Claire.
Thanks, Claire. Chair, sorry to jump in. I mean,
Go for it.
all I would add is just to re-emphasise the points if Deb Spears wants to come in, but we've recast our internal governance approach. We're looking for that to be signed off next week. The Audit and Risk Board internally has much more arguably discipline around it. It's going to be driving implementation, attendance of the relevant executive leads is mandated. So we're tightening up our own internal systems so that coupled with improved quality of reporting in line with what the committee expects, we should definitely be seeking to improve that audit opinion that we've got. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, Angela, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everybody that's pulled the report together. I know that there'll be a lot of contributions from across the organisation, so thank you. A few points and then I've got a particular question, but I just wondered whether this is an opportunity, and given the new governance arrangements that you're speaking about, Tom, to really think about how we can look at the risks that are presented in some of these reports in a fresh way. Some of them, as Brian has said, are long-standing. Take a review of them. Are these risks that are really a priority? Are they risks that are really going to impact on the business? And in so doing, then have that prioritisation and linkage, because I'm conscious that when you look at some of them, there are issues that are similar, but different teams are taking the lead on them. So what is the learning that we can take from that, and how do we cascade that learning through the organisation? So just a reset of, are we sure that all of these risks are the ones that we definitely need to be taken forward? They might have been appropriate at a point in time. Are they still relevant? And that might help the team to feel that, the team across the organisation, that this is a bit more manageable. My second point is about accountability. Are we absolutely crystal clear that there is an owner for each of these that is seen as the driver? And I know that for some of them, there's many other parts of the organisation that need to be involved, but are we really clear about who's responsible and who is going to take the lead in making sure that this happens within the timescale that we agree? And I think that is pretty key. My other point is about the cost versus benefits, because I think there's a lot in the report about the dependencies on technology, and we know the strain on the digital team. And again, we're looking at some small pieces of technology to support certain audits. Is that really the best use of the resource, or are there other mechanisms, other ways that we can do that? I think that there's just a cost-benefit analysis. And my other point is really about a wider issue of continuous improvement, that across the organisation, it reinforces the need to further embed that notion of everybody having a responsibility for improvement. And being able then to contribute to these improvements, because that's what they are, that people are really looking out for where there are weaknesses, where there's areas that need to be looked at and changed, and that would then hopefully help a lot of the recommendations to be addressed quite quickly. One very specific point, and it is a point of detail, but I was really interested in the abnormal loads one. Just thinking about the pressure on the budgets and so on, and I'm sure it's not a lot of money, but it's quite symbolic of how change could actually be enacted to free up staff time so that we can have more staff on our streets. And I just wondered whether that was the end of that particular issue, or whether there was still further discussion to be had. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. Thank you. Tom, you'd like to come in on this?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Angela. I'll cover the first 4 points, and I think, Donna, maybe if you could be ready on the abnormal loads point. Angela, in terms of risk, I can give you assurance on that. We had a risk workshop last week, which I chaired, along with Sarah McKenzie, who's on the call today. We're going to be looking further in the agenda in a bit more detail at risk, but that's exactly the perspective that we're adopting. Sarah has been pivotal to that as well from the finance side, by having a much better discussion about strategic risk and actually whether the micromanagement of risk to a level of detail that is probably not helpful, and that some of these risks may have become issues or actually have been adequately dealt with. To give you some reassurance, we're putting risk again at the heart of the Strategic Leadership Board. Chief Constable wants that to be central to the discussions, so we start having, frankly, the conversations we need to about areas that are the most significant risks. That will be informed by the work in the papers that have been referred to today. So Sarah can perhaps say a bit more about that maybe later in the agenda. But thank you for those comments, and it's helpful endorsement of what we're trying to achieve. In terms of accountability, you raised about who is responsible for each recommendation. Donna is pushing absolutely on that. Again, DCC Spears, through essentially a reset of the Audit and Risk Board internally, the agreement of new terms of reference, it will require that there are named owners for each recommendation and genuine accountability for them, and it will impact on, frankly, their business objectives and then how their performance is assessed. So that's part of this as well. On the point about the cost benefit analysis that we should do prior to
to interrupt you, Tom, sorry, there is a dog barking, so
it's not
someone in
mine.
the background.
Definitely not mine. Okay.
Apologies, Tom.
No problem. On the cost benefit analysis and the impact, Angela, that you called out on the digital team, at the point at which we accept recommendations, all of that should have been looked at. And again, with a better performing Audit and Risk Board, with an SLB that's more focused around risk, actually we can put recommendations into some perspective. And there have been more robust discussions taking place. I know John's on the call, but with HMI, with the BDO as well, about the acceptance of recommendations. But certainly by the time they are endorsed and accepted, the commitment is there, and they should have had a proper cost benefit analysis applied to them, that they are absolutely required recommendations. And I know Donna's got that as a feature of her work. And then the last point I would cover around continuous improvement. Best Value has driven that point home about the shared collective responsibility of the executive team for continuous improvement. There was a specific Best Value recommendation on adopting a coherent approach to organisational learning and to continuous improvement. We know that has not been done wholly coherently in the past, but it's a shared executive responsibility. Chief Constable's got it within our business objectives for the year ahead, and is something that is going to be at the heart of everything that we do now. So I think you will see more progress in that space as well. And we can perhaps bring an update. Mark McCabe, who's going to be updating on Best Value later, can perhaps say a bit more about some of the work that we're doing to embed that commitment to continuous improvement. And I'll probably pass across to Donna, if that's okay, on that specific final point. Thank you.
Okay. In relation to the abnormal loads, I can confirm that when the business area presented their closing statements to HMICS, they committed to continue engaging with the government and Transport Scotland on the issue, but it wasn't expected that there would be any significant change in the short term, which is why HMICS accepted closure, but it is something that the business area will continue to focus on.
Okay.
Thank you. That's great. I'm reassured what you're saying, Tom. That's really encouraging, and maybe we will see, some changes to the quantity of risks and recommendations that we see in future. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Angela. Any more comments or questions from members at this stage? I mean, yeah, so just to kind of summarize this, I think, Tom, it's good to hear. It's really helpful to hear around the new governance structure and the commitment there. And just to echo what my colleague separately said, it is reassuring to a degree. Can I just ask maybe from my SPA official colleagues, what visibility do we have from an official level? Do we have any representation on the Audit and Risk Board? Are we, or what sort of mechanisms exist for us? Because again, I'm conscious that by the time data gets to this committee, to our committee, it will have been through all of the internal management committees, etc. There's sometimes a lag. I think I welcome everything that has happened, and this isn't necessarily a message, to Tom, to your team and to Donna's team, but I'm also mindful of the fact that I think we've been talking about this for about a year now. I think it was about a year ago that we had the audit into recommendations management. So I'm conscious time has passed. There's another some really good stuff has happened in the background. I feel like we're more in control. And but you yourself acknowledge more needs to be done. New governance structure, more focus on accountability. I am keen to kind of understand between when we might start seeing some of the open recommendation numbers drop, because again, there will be a time period between putting all of this new structure in place and there actually being an impact of that. I'm just quite keen to understand what level of assurance or visibility we have, either through our SPA officials or or in some other way, shape, or form. So I'm keen kind of not to go from another meeting to another meeting to another meeting, because it may still be quite a while before we really start the number of open recommendations drop. And I see Tom would like to come in, and John, I would quite like to hear from you as well.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for allowing me just to come in first on this. Myself and DCC Spears had a meeting last week with John and with the SPA Chief Executive. There is an open invitation to attend our internal Audit and Risk Board to SPA counterparts. Transparency is going to be central to this working. It was August last year, Chair, that the BDO report came in about the volume of outstanding recommendations. It has taken a while, but in truth, what I'm describing, and I'm conscious the SPA officers have been engaged, but there's probably a wider presentation that we could bring in, maybe not wait till the next committee, but that just sets out all of the steps that we're now taking to improve reporting, improve governance, put risk at the heart of discussions, take a more informed view of strategic risk, and embed accountability, and frankly get executive members to take ownership and make sure that they're held to account. And I know the Chief has pushed very hard, so I don't want to repeat myself, but that's a feature as recently as last week, and I think it's essentially the natural next step. The SPA officers would come in and can be part of those discussions and challenge us. Thank you.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that, Tom. And as I say, please don't take any of this as criticism. I understand that things take time, but it's balancing exactly that, giving you the time to do it properly, and also making sure that there is a public accountability as well and visibility. So thank you. I really appreciate that. Maybe just before I bring John in, Alan, did you want to come in just on the back of Tom, or?
Yeah, please. And apologies, I haven't spoken. My signal, I'm in Domara, but my reception is absolutely dreadful. So I just really wanted to echo everything that Tom has said. And again, at our Chief Officer team meeting yesterday, we had a conversation and a focus on the work that needs to be done very specifically in this space, and really needs to be led by the senior executive officers who own some of those recommendations. So I just really wanted to reinforce that. And again, it was myself extended the invitation to our Audit and Risk Board. So I would welcome some of the challenge and a lot of independent scrutiny of just is that board working. So I'm hopeful that some colleagues for the SPA will take up that offer.
Okay, thank you, Alan. That's great. John, please.
I think it's been said. So yes, going forward, we'll attend the Audit and Risk Board, and I think the DCC also suggested that provide a bit of an input that gives members and the own SP perspective as well on some of the risk challenges. So that'll be really welcome. But also just what we have been doing, we meet very regularly with Donna and her team, as well as internal audit, looking at some of these recommendations and the challenges. So that will continue, and hopefully through the Audit and Risk Board, we can strengthen some of our scrutiny and advice that we can give to you as members.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. Thank you. And John Patterson, you'd like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that all of policing has been on a journey in the last 12 to 18 months around recommendations, and there's been a huge amount of work done, initially by Donna and the team, and then as it's fallen under Tom's new strategic portfolio. If I could give you and other members assurance as well that there's a slight difference in approach now from HMI, in that we want to work across policing to help the agencies deliver the recommendations. It's not a one and done. We publish the report and then it's over to the agencies. I think there's a continuing responsibility on those that carry out audits and inspections to work across policing to make sure that they are deliverable. Times change, and you as the chair and the members are quite rightly focused on the older recommendations, but times moved rapidly, and I know that we've been working with Police Scotland in particular to try and find out if those recommendations are still current, what's getting done, and can we close them down, and that future recommendations have either got a strategic focus or an operational focus, and we should look to work across those different areas rather than putting everything together. I know that I'm working with Vanessa just now to try and get a session arranged for board members over the summer. And having spoken to Craig, we would be delighted to not just speak to the new members about what we're doing in our approach for recommendations, but existing members. And if you felt it appropriate, Chair, we would be delighted to come to an audit and risk assurance away day and talk in a bit more detail about what we're doing, if that gives you some more assurance. Thank you.
That's great, John. No, that's always really helpful to have your perspective on this. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I think that is reassuring. I think it touches some of the points that colleagues have raised on this call around that, you know, are the recommendations still appropriate? Has the risk moved on, etc., etc. So it's really encouraging to understand your kind of shift in your perspective, in your approach, and also the fact that things are under review. So appreciate there is a lot happening in the background. And as I say, I didn't want this discussion here to be a criticism or, you know, not acknowledging the effort that goes into this. I think we've struck the right balance between, you know, really this is a priority. We understand this is a priority for everybody, and I think everybody is in the same boat, acknowledging that more needs to be done and things are in plan behind the scenes to get us collectively to where we need to get to. So I hope that you take this as the committee giving everybody who's involved in this the committee's support. You know, we're here to challenge, but we're also here to support. And as colleagues have said, whatever it is that we can do to help, we will do. So thank you for that. I appreciate everybody being kind and open and not defensive, and just transparent around, you know, the size of the challenge and the ways in which it is being tackled. I really appreciate that. So thank you for that. I see no further comments or questions on this. I think we've given this a really good discussion. So that's good. I see also, Claire, we've got you with now as well. Apologies, we kind of had to skip through your agenda items. So, but maybe if we then just come back to your item of 2.1, although I appreciate a lot of the conversation we had just now probably is quite relevant to this agenda item as well. So Claire, please.
Yeah, thank you. And apologies for my technical problems at the start. I had no audio, but can hear you perfectly now. The main message from the progress report is that the internal audit plan is progressing as planned and all the KPIs are on track. The follow-up we've already covered in some detail. The work we did this quarter showed limited progress, though I would say whilst the full implementation rate dropped a lot, there was 88% of the recommendations partially implemented, and our discussions with management did show that a lot of those were getting close to completion. So we're hoping that we do see more evidence of full completion in the quarter ahead, and that rate will improve. That's really it for the progress report.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's a positive. The fact that there is a substantial amount of partially completed recommendations as well. So that's good. Okay, are there any questions at this stage from members? Pauline, please.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire. It was on the plan for the coming year. I know last year we couldn't do the communications engagement audit, and the insurance audit was one that replaced that. But when are we planning on doing the communications and engagement audit? I can't see it in the plan.
Yeah, so when we were doing our plan for 26-27, that was another area where we talked about whether or not to include that one, and it was felt there was quite a lot of consultancy work going on in that area just now, and it's probably not yet reached a stage where an independent review of what's been done there is going to be effective. It's probably going to involve a bit of duplication, so it's still within our audit universe, and we would consider that again for 27-28, making sure I get my years right. But if like the risk profile in that area were to change, we could flex our plan. But at the minute, that's where it's sitting.
That's helpful, and maybe we can find out where the kind of the consultancy work is at the moment, Chair, and that will inform the work that we're doing in terms of kind of a public trust and confidence. That I know that is a key priority for the Chair.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay, Angela, please.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Claire. I just had a question over the timings of some of the audits, and forgive me, you'll have worked this out, but the prioritisation of them, I know that there is concern amongst police staff, police officers, as well as the SP, particularly around sickness absence. And I just wondered the rationale for that being later on in the audit cycle.
I'm not aware that there was a specific rationale. I guess we consult with people on their quieter and operational pressures, busy times, quieter times. I'm not sure if there was anything more than that driving that timing, to be honest.
Okay,
Donna, do you have a perspective on this?
I think the business area requested this to be moved because there was a lot of activity in that area, and we wanted to have that embedded in so that we could see how that had the benefits of that when we had the audit.
Okay, thanks, Donna. We can pick it up at the People Committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see no further hands up. So thank you very much, Claire. And I think this enables us to move on to 2.3, which is the SPA Audit and Improvement Tracker. John?
It's me, thank you. And just in the interest of brevity, there are no specific issues that draw members' attention to. All of our recommendations remain on target. And for the HMICS areas for development, we have 3 of the 17 that are still to be completed, and all of those are included in our business plan for next year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, John. Are there any questions or comments on this? I see none. Okay, thank you. So this enables us to then move on to section 3 of our agenda, which is the internal audit reporting. And 3.1, we've got 2 internal audit reports into insurance obligations and recruitment and retention. And so Claire, it is over to yourself.
Great. So the first report on insurance, this was a look at the insurance arrangements, particularly including compliance with the Scottish Public Finance manual requirements around insurance. We found some good practice areas. There is a really clear insurance framework, clear escalation process in place around approval of any insurance policies or changes to policies, and good guidance in place on assessing insurance. We also noted through our interviews like a regular meeting structure was in place to discuss insurance and risk matters. And there's also been a broker appointed and quite extensive use of benchmarking to help assess value for money in the insurance process as well. So quite a few areas of good practice. However, there's a number of findings too. So the main one was that the framework and the guidance for insurance are still in draft and not really yet fully embedded across the organisation. And a key control in the process is the self-insurance risk assessments, where areas of risk exposure are fully assessed and the right insurance route determined. We couldn't evidence that they were being completed consistently, which, as I said, is a key control for understanding the risk exposure. So on that basis, we've given limited assurance for control design. Essentially, while there's the foundations for a good control environment are there, there's further work needed to just embed it and improve it further and make sure it's operated consistently. Because we could, though, find good evidence of appropriate discussion and risk mitigating activities in place in practice, we have given moderate assurance over control effectiveness, but the effectiveness is still constrained somewhat by the design limitations that we've outlined. All of the recommendations in the insurance report have been accepted, and as I said, it is just a case really of further embedding the work that's already been done in that area before we can give a higher assurance rating.
Okay. Do members want to come in on this particular report just now? Yeah, and I see Brian, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think this question really is for Claire. There's a couple of points in the report on insurance where you've said page 3, we were not provided with a claims tracker for employment liability and vehicle claims. Also on page 9, we were unable to obtain a copy of the asset register. Why is this? Is your access being restricted? Is it out with scope? Is there clearance or sensitivity issues? What's going on there?
So I guess both of those areas weren't really in scope in that we weren't going to be doing any kind of sample testing of those or anything, but essentially like when we walk through a process at the start and determine our testing strategy, we want to see it end to end. So that's why those items were requested. We requested them a few times, and essentially I think the issue was that they didn't have one single source of that record, so it was difficult to gather all the information so we could be confident we've got a complete list of assets or a complete list of claims. And it wasn't essential for us because it wasn't in scope, so we didn't keep on pursuing it. But the recommendations have come through in the report around having more central oversight around claims trends and lessons learned and things coming out of those, because I think it did raise a concern for us that if we can't centrally show the progress of all of these easily, are we getting the right KPIs and performance reporting information out of the process? So hopefully that answers the question, and you've seen that finding coming through in the report as well.
Yeah, I think my main concern was access was being restricted, and I've got confidence from that report response that it's not being so. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Claire. Pauline, please.
Yeah, thanks very much. Going back to a previous conversation about the timescales being realistic, I really just wanted assurance from the auditors that, you know, some of these timescales, which are almost a couple of years out, you're content with them for implementation in terms of minimising the risks that have been identified. And just to give some wider assurance to this committee, the legal committee does look at claims management and the lessons learned, and we've been doing quite a bit of work with the team in Police Scotland around how we can get more assurance about the lessons learned going forward with respect to employers' liability, public liability and motor vehicle claims too. So that's very much work in progress. And my final point is probably a question for Sarah about value for money around insurance, Sarah, and what's your kind of views around that?
Happy to come in, Chair, if that's okay on best value. Pauline, I'll be honest, it's not something I've dug deep into in my first 6 months, but it is something that I'm always mindful of. I know that the self-insure is the largest proportion. I know that we need to have specific insurance regardless. So, but I will take that as an action because I know we need specific certain types of car insurance, and I know that we have the Motability claims. As you'll be aware, Finance have been working really closely with legal in terms of tracking those Motability claims and not only looking at those trends, but what is it inferring and linking back into, for example, our learning and development team in terms of driver training, etc. So I suppose reassurance that we are looking at and analysing the data, what it's telling us, and linking it back into the organisation. I suppose from your very direct question on best value, it's something that I would have to drive in more detail in terms of that holistic picture about self-insure or not.
Okay, thank you for that, Sarah. And let's see, Tom, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Katharina. And insurance sits under myself with Sarah Mackenzie and Michelle Hutchison. So, I mean, there was a specific point raised about access to the asset register, I think, by yourself, Angela. You know, that can be provided, and I don't think that was a feature of the discussions. Sorry, I know that legal have obviously got a big role in this, but we'll work with Sarah rough head in terms of the financial implications in achieving best value. But certainly we've got a locus around insurance as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And then I think there was just another part of Pauline's question, which was directed at Claire, I believe, around the timelines for the recommendations. Some of them are about 2 years out, and I think Pauline, your question was, I think, from an auditor's perspective, do you think that's appropriate? If you have a view, Claire.
I think some of the recommendations, the timescale was quite long, but I guess the key control around completing the risk assessments effectively, the intention for that was to identify the highest risk areas first and work through them. So I think that long timescale is probably a reflection of how long it'll take to work through all the areas of the organisation where there might be insurance risk exposure. But I take some comfort from the fact that the higher risk areas will be addressed first. So we should be seeing a reduction of that risk during that period rather than nothing until 2028.
Yeah, okay, that's great. Thank you, Claire. And Sarah, you've got your hand up as well. Did you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just to say that what we had requested as the risk team had requested that this audit was conducted. So we had observed that the focus was quite heavily on the maintenance of the commercial policies, and that the work that the insurance function was doing was very, very heavily focused on that and not on the bit that's self-insured. So we didn't have a lot of assurance around whether that was representing value for money or not. Also, there was quite a bit of staff turnover with the insurance managers leaving, and we took some feedback from them as well around, why that was. And we reviewed the role and brought it more aligned closely to the risk management side of things. And so we've made quite a few improvements since that happened. It was less than a year ago. So the framework, for example, is a brand new document. So it's taken a bit of time to build that all up, which is why it still remains in draft. And we've done a bit of consultation, and that's taken a bit of time as well. So we're almost at the sign-off point now. And with regard to the timescales, it's exactly as Claire just kind of highlighted. We're just conscious of the size and scale of the organisation and the amount of areas we would potentially have to cover. So what we do is, again, bringing that link closer to the risk management side of things, we look at what's already on the risk register and flag the ones that we think are insurance relevant. That gives us a sense of whether we need to go in and dig deeper in those areas. And also from the provision of information and the claims information side of it, a lot of that is out with our control because we don't actually hold the documents. They're used by either legal or finance for their own particular purposes. So we've set up a short life working group that looks at our access to that information and the assets that we would need to be able to make good insurance decisions, and bring that all together to ensure that we are confident as the insurance function, but also that we can give confidence to the insurers themselves as well, and therefore they would give us the best prices for those premiums. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Angela, you did have your hand up, but you've taken it down. I don't know if you still wanted to come in.
No, that's answered my question on that. I do have a question on the next audit, the recruitment one though. So
okay, no, thank you. So Claire, back over to you just to introduce the next report, please. Thank you.
Again, the recruitment report, we found a lot of good practice in this area. There's a recruitment system in place which gives a single workflow for recruitment and hiring managers for all the recruitment activities. So that means that there's a really clear log of activities and the process that's followed is really consistent. And there's a system supporting management of pre-employment checks, providing good KPI information. It's got all the interview records, and we can see from that they're structured and allow for consistency and facilitating objective recruitment decisions. Structured competency-based scoring can be evidenced. Our testing of the recruitment process showed no exceptions. The process was being followed consistently. So really good feedback on the recruitment side. The two findings that we've raised relate to recruitment training. There's no process in place to make sure that all hiring managers have done recruitment training and no really clearly defined requirements around training. And the other finding is around a sourcing strategy. We think it would be beneficial to develop a more formal sourcing strategy that links talent attraction activities with future resource and capability requirements and like development activity within the organisation. Addressing those two areas would further mitigate the recruitment risks. But overall, we've given moderate assurance over control design effectiveness, as in the main, this area is operating well.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Right, I know, Angela, you had a question, so I'll come to you first and then to Brian.
Thank you, and thanks again for the report. It was particularly in relation to the training for the recruiting managers. And I can understand that some may have previous experience, but I did wonder whether or not there was any discussion on some form of assessment, because it's a massive investment. People are the biggest part of the budget, and making sure that you get it right, or as right as you possibly can, at that early stage is so crucial, as we all know. I just wondered if you still felt that, while you wouldn't expect everybody to go through a training course, that there would at least be some check that there was a degree of competency, and that there was also an understanding of the policies and processes. I know that that's come out as being well endorsed, but I just wondered whether or not there should be further checks there.
Thank you for that question, Angela. And I see, Heather, you've got your hand up. Would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll just try and answer that for you, Angela. We have always had training in place for interview skills training. It's always been there. A few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, when we changed to the competency and values framework, we started new training to make sure that people were assessing correctly with regards to competencies and values. And I think whilst we do know that many people are interview trained, what I think the audit highlighted was that it's a manual check for the recruitment function to go in and make sure that at least one of the panel members is being fully trained on the interview skills and the more modern way of interviewing. So we have accepted that we need to make sure that that's more obvious and clearer. And yes, other people they come into us, they're fully able to interview and they've had many, many years of experience of doing that. We still want them to go through our own interview training, just so that they know how to assess the way consistently that we do. But what we've started doing in recruitment as well is actually doing recruitment training on how to fill in the packs, how to write good feedback, how to make sure that it's specific so that the individual can take feedback on board and understand why they've been successful or not. But we have taken that action on board, that we need to make sure it's more robust than it currently is. So we are going through a full review, end-to-end review anyway, of staff recruitment just now. It's part of one of our strategic objectives. So that is in progress at the moment. And this is all getting taken into consideration so that we can evidence it actually on the recruitment system, so that we don't actually have to go and do manual checks on the scope system now. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that it is work in progress, and it will be improved.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, it's obviously, as you say, work in progress. I just think that it takes an inordinate amount of time to deal with performance issues if we don't get it right at the recruitment stage. It can be a false economy, not taking the time to really make sure that we've got the skills in place to select. And it obviously goes beyond the interview. It's right from thinking about what are the skills that are needed to fulfil this particular function. So anyway, I thank you for that reply.
Okay. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Heather. Right, I've got Brian and then Paul. Brian, please.
Firstly, just to echo, I suppose, Angela's comments, I think that the comments in the report suggests that previous experience, recruitment experience, is adequate enough. I just want to echo that. I think that comment isn't really appropriate, in that it should really be consistent with the standards of Police Scotland in terms of recruitment processes. So it was probably the comment that surprised and alerted me in the same way I think probably it did so Angela. The second thing I just wanted to say really was, it's probably a question as well for Claire. On page 4, you say the training requirements are not defined. But I think later on in the report, I think it's page 7, you say the policy outlines that at least one member of the panel should have been given formal training. So I'm just wondering if how you kind of match up those two statements. I understand what's been said since, and that it's probably about evidencing the manual check of all that. So I was just squaring those two things up. But also I wanted to just check in with Claire whether there was a view on whether the training that was available was adequate. I get the impression from the report that it is adequate. It's just that the manual recording of who goes on it isn't good enough.
I think it wasn't clear to us whether that requirement for one member of the panel to have recruitment training was the Police Scotland provided recruitment training in every case, or if it was more a case of, well, they've done a lot of recruitment and they've been trained in the past. So it was more about it being explicit about what level of training, like what particular course they needed to have done.
Okay. Thank you, that's helpful. Well, I think from what Heather told us earlier is it's the practice is police internal training. Is that right? I see Heather nodding. So yeah, I think Heather, the voiceover that you provided today has been quite helpful in terms of some of those details. That maybe just by looking at the report and looking at the response to the recommendations, as you can probably tell, members just had questions. So it's almost like the response to the recommendations has raised some additional questions.
Yeah. No, and just to reiterate, our preference is that at minimum one person on the panel is fully trained, but obviously we would prefer it that before anyone interviews that they have actually had all their training to make sure that they understand how to assess in using our competency values framework. So that is what our preference would be. But minimum standard is that one person will have gone through that training and as part of the panel.
Okay, that's good, thank you. And I see, Alan, you've got your hand up as well. Did you want to come in on this point?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. All I really wanted to add to what's been said is that in terms of the training that we receive over the duration of our career, it's very much to a UK standard. So it's not a bespoke bit of training we do within Police Scotland. We are trained to a College of Policing standard. So there are consistency right across the UK, and quite a number of us would be involved in interviewing for other parts of the UK as well, because we're trying to achieve that standard.
Okay, thank you, Alan, that's helpful. Right, Paul, you've been very patient.
Yeah, I'm going to give you the full house on this particular point, because it is something that kind of stuck out like a sore thumb, and a management response of partially accepted is always something that's like a red rag to a bull to audit committee members. So I'm curious then what hasn't been accepted from the recommendations. And I would say that every organisation that I've been involved with, almost all of them, I think all of them insist that everybody sitting on a panel has to be certainly trained in discrimination, so that they don't trip up and end up with the organisation finding itself a tribunal. So I'm curious to hear a bit more about, is that covered, or are we pitching in people to recruitment panels that could expose us to risk potentially?
Okay, thank you. Kate, you'd like to come in on this, I believe.
Heather, if you don't mind me chipping in. So to answer your question, there is an ED&I training and a CVF training provided compulsory to the whole organization. So we're assuming all hiring managers will be part of that training. It was partially accepted because we do speak to the training team to talk about what is actually provided as part of the training to the hiring managers, but the responsibility doesn't sit with us as a team. It does sit with the training. So as part of this recommendation, we linked in with them to make sure that the training is fit for purpose and it covers all kind of relevant issues. But we've also as a recruitment team, rolled out drop-in sessions for hiring managers. And I think it's also worth mentioning that we do speak to the hiring managers at every stage of the recruitment process. So the moment we get a vacancy, we'll have a briefing call and they are talked through the whole process, including interviewing.
Okay. I hear what you're saying, that it's not your responsibility, but is the point that BDO are making that it should be your responsibility?
Fair enough. Responsibility maybe is not the right word. We take the responsibility of it. However, designing the training and delivering the training sits with the training team. So we try to work with them as much as we can to ensure the relevant context is provided during that training.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you both. Okay. Right, I see no further comments or questions on this, I believe. So I think this concludes this agenda item, Claire. I think we are done with that, which enables us to move on to agenda item 3.2, and that is the annual internal audit report. So again, Claire, over to yourself to introduce that.
Okay, so this report gives a summary of all the work that we've carried out in year and includes our annual opinion on the control environment as a result of that work. As we've touched on already, the opinion this year is that improvements are required to the control environment. This means that we've identified significant weaknesses in design and operational effectiveness in a number of different areas, and improvements are required to those to ensure risks are appropriately managed and best value is achieved. Of the areas that we look at, there's quite a number of the limited assurance conclusions that were driven by things like inconsistent operational controls or gaps in clarity of ownership or governance. And there's also a lot where the key driver was reliance on manual processes and limitations in systems and management information. So it's not wholly the absence of control frameworks, but rather the consistent and effective and efficient operation of those control frameworks. The rate of implementation of audit recommendations, as we've said, has also contributed to our overall opinion, and continued focus on embedding agreed actions in a timely manner will be important to strengthen that control environment. We have also included within this report further information on themes that we have identified during our work in the year. In addition to the ones I've already mentioned that I think are the ones that kind of come through in each of the years that we've been involved in the audit process, there's also a lot of areas highlighting capacity pressures, skill gaps, incomplete training coverage, which is also coming out as a key theme in multiple of our audits as well. So there's a lot of information in here around the individual results, but they'll all have been reported to you in the past. And we've included information on total number of recommendations and so on. There's been 142 recommendations in total in the year, 5 high, 133 medium and 4 low. So quite a volume of actions and improvement activities raised in the year. We've included also information on our quality assurance processes and also our quality assurance improvement programme and information on our KPI performance. We have rated ourselves as kind of amber in a few of our KPI areas, but essentially the reasons for those are timings of assignments being moved slightly if they've been impacted by staff absence on either side, with no significant areas that we need to focus on improvement on for next year. And finally, our attestation of independence, just an annual statement to confirm that we remain independent within our internal audit function. We have not acted in any management capacity or taken on responsibility for operation of controls or anything else that would compromise our independence. I appreciate there's a lot of information in this report, so happy to take any questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Claire. I really appreciate that. I see, Tom, you would like to come in, please.
Thanks, Chair. Really just to give you and members assurance the seriousness with which we take this report. We recognise that getting this audit opinion of improvements required is concerning. Claire has made reference to challenges around the pace of implementation and tightening up of the control environment. That's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So we're ready for further discussion and feedback on it. But I just wanted to give you that overarching view that this is actually part of the evidence base that's helping DCC Spears to drive in and make sure that this work is taken seriously and properly embedded. So thank you.
No, thank you for that, Tom. I appreciate that. Okay. I've got Brian who would like to come in, and then Pauline. Brian, please.
Yeah, just disappointing to see this overall opinion on the control design weaknesses and internal audit implementation of recommendations. I suppose my questions were really probably to Claire and possibly to Joe as well. The first question is probably, what was the opinion last year? Was it this form of improvement required opinion last year? And secondly, to me, this is quite an unusual opinion in the public sector. And I just wanted to get an idea from Claire, maybe Joe, as to whether this is unusual, exceptional in their experience of public sector currently.
So, is it exceptional? I think we achieve quite good coverage in year, and I think we have hit on quite a few areas where there's been significant change activities that have not yet embedded themselves. So that has resulted in quite a lot of limited assurance ratings. I think in each of the reports, if you look in the detail, there are activities either underway or planned that will improve this. So in part, I think it's just a result of us picking the higher risk areas, and then more findings have come out. There's always a selection of public sector clients who will have improvement required. And like some of the issues that are the root causes of that, like investment in systems and trying to embed new controls across a large environment, will be common to other large public sector bodies. I think it's just been a feature of us looking at quite a few of those areas in year that's then driven the overall opinion. Last year, the opinion, I guess, it was presented differently. So that's one thing. So there wasn't the kind of clear 4 stages, and that's a result of ongoing changes to our methodology as a result of like new standards coming in. But essentially, we were probably more in the generally satisfactory with improvements required in some areas. Does that necessarily mean the control environment's worsened? I mean, internal audit are always going on the information that they gather through their work and through their general engagement with the organisation. So it's difficult to be sure because we're only looking at the information we're looking at, and changes can happen in year and from year to year in terms of the risk exposure, but also the visibility of any risk areas and risk exposures. So it's difficult to say. I'd say it's concerning, and it requires effort to improve, which we've already recognised in this meeting. But I wouldn't say that you'd be alone in having that opinion.
Okay. Good question, good answer. Thank you, Claire. That is helpful to understand, I suppose, what has contributed to this. I've got Pauline who wanted to come in.
Thanks very much, and thanks for your report, Claire. I guess the question is probably for Tom in terms of that page 6, Tom, around those thematic areas. And I wondered to what extent they'll inform that improvement work that you spoke about under item 2.2, because it seems to pick up a lot of the issues that you spoke about earlier on. Would that be helpful in terms of almost kind of grouping these issues into those themes and taking them forward in that way and incorporating them into the improvement plan?
Chair, if I can come back in, Pauline, in a word, yes. The report, when I refer to it as part of the central evidence, the way in which that's been organised by Claire and the team has been extremely helpful. And that's then informing all the steps that we're now taking that I've given you a flavour of today. So to give you some assurance, yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay.
If I may come back in, Chair, is that okay? I think, Tom, you spoke earlier on about, you know, sharing that improvement plan with us. I think that would be really helpful to see then, given that we've got this report and that page 6, it'd be useful just to kind of compare progress to that.
Yeah, very happy to do that.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pauline. I think that's a very sensible suggestion. Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Angela, please.
And just to follow up on that, I think we talked earlier about accountability, and I'm just wondering, Tom, we don't need to wait to do the review to assign some of the outstanding recommendations to individuals, and rather than it being the person that, you know, normally comes to this committee, there'll be a lot of service experts where these recommendations should rightly sit. Excuse me. Is that something that is underway, and is there a simple way that we could get that assurance that each of these recommendations is appropriately allocated to an individual and not a group, not a committee, not a governance body, because that collective responsibility always means that there's nobody responsible. How do we actually get people driving these priority risks? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Angela, to come back in, yes, absolutely. I mean, Donna can maybe say a bit more than me. Donna and the team are tracking all of the recommendations, and from this report as well, both those outstanding from individual audits, but the overarching piece as well. But Donna, can you maybe just come in and describe some of the work that you're doing, and that point about single point of leadership on delivery?
Donna, have we lost Donna? I think
if we've lost Donna, I can give you absolute assurance, Angela, that is exactly the work that we're doing. It's the conversations we've had at the executive team. Ownership at exec level comes through the Chief Constable's business objectives as well. Donna,
Apologies.
you're back with us.
Yes, I'd left the meeting.
Donna, did you hear the question? So, Tom, you wanted Donna to come in on that allocation of actions.
Yeah, thanks. Donna, it was really just to give more of a flavour to members about the work you do to pursue, if you like, individual owners of recommendations and make sure that it's understood about their responsibility for delivery, as that pertains as well to this overarching report with the audit opinion within it.
Okay. So every recommendation that is added to our system has 2 people assigned to it, and they're named individuals rather than any roles. So we have the overarching owner, this person that's responsible and accountable for delivery. We've also got the assignee, so that is the person that is responsible for undertaking the work. As well as that, we can break down the recommendations by a senior responsible officer, and that's typically it goes into a portfolio area, so a director at ACC or director level, and they get sight of their recommendations. And when we're doing our governance reporting, we do it at every single level. And we've got scheduled alerts and triggered alerts that go out that are automated from the system. So when a period of time before the recommendation is due, the assignee, the person that's doing the work, gets an alert, you've got this work to complete. If there's no work undertaken in that time and it's not completed, the owner then gets a prompt to say nothing has been undertaken in relation to this recommendation. And then we've also got our own escalation routes. But every single recommendation has an owner and an updater as standard, and we don't have any gaps. It cannot go in the system without that information. Does that give you assurance?
Well, it gives me assurance that the process is in place, Donna, and forgive me, it's you know, I can appreciate that you're doing all that you can. I just wonder in terms of the culture of the organisation, is this given the regard that it needs to be? when we see this type of report coming forward? Are there consequences?
Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Angela. I mean, that's it. And I referred to culture earlier in the today's discussion. That's the challenge that we need this improvement plan to overcome. And it's not to say that the culture has been utterly, dismissive or whatever about implementation of recommendations, but actually best value. The report, which we'll come on to speak about, has re-emphasised the central role of continuous improvement. And that's now a central feature of the governance framework that we've developed and we're taking forward. So I can give you that assurance that we recognise the culture. This report suggests it. The report last August about outstanding recommendations pointed to it. And all of that is part of what's allowing us to frankly lean into that and drive change. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Tom. Okay, thank you, colleagues. I see no further hands up. I think, it's good that everybody everybody acknowledges the gravity of this. Like this is an uncomfortable report to receive, an uncomfortable report to read. I think there's absolutely, again, there's no defensiveness around this, and I really appreciate that everybody understands that this is something from which Police Scotland needs to move forward. I think maybe just one observation from me, and I know we focused a lot on recommendations, but actually, looking at the thematics, which are really helpful, Claire, those kind of thematic elements on slide 6, but also having reflected on a lot of the findings from the internal audit reports, but also the biometrics commissioner's report on fingerprints that was discussed at the Forensic Services Committee just, I think, last week. All of it, to me, to a degree, points towards management, grip and control around some of the operational practices. So, I think some of the findings, certainly in my view, would be things that I would maybe expect kind of management to pick up as part of the day-to-day management, rather than waiting for an audit to come in and kind of have a look at that. And I know that, Tom, you talk around, you talked about the governance and accountability and the Audit and Risk Board, being stood up, and I think that absolutely will go some way with hopefully that cultural change and that really increased focus on accountability. But from my perspective, I would also kind of like to, I suppose, urge Police Scotland to understand why isn't some of this not being picked up by management? Some of the things that are coming through, or maybe it is being picked up by management. Because again, Claire, because I think you've tried to be very, very fair here, saying you guys looked at areas where some of them Police Scotland asked you to look at because they knew that there were likely to be areas, and it's quite helpful to have an audit report to kind of understand that as you're fixing things, you've kind of sweeping everything into that improvement activity. And you also acknowledge, Claire, that in a lot of the areas that you were looking at, there is already some improvement activity underway. So I think, it's important to be kind of balanced around that, and you have given us that perspective. But as I say, certainly from my perspective, there in this report, it's not just about recommendations, it's just generally, I would urge you to consider what is it around just some operational management of some of the functions that possibly results in the themes that have been coming through, and why isn't some of this potentially being picked up in the course of just business. So I appreciate there's a lot of kind of ground that has been covered here, but I think that's kind of what it indicates to me as well. It's not just the response to recommendations, but just general business management. Apologies, I'm full of cold. So today's summer colds are the worst. So I don't know, Tom, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, thanks, Katerina, and it's really good points. The kind of last input from me on this one is simply that the change that we're trying to implement is that Donna, Sarah Mackenzie, who's spoken earlier, who leads on risk, were less in the kind of observation space and a good deal more robust. And we've had support from the chief and the DCC to be as challenging as that. And it's certainly the way that I'm conceiving of our function as adding some value to, frankly, what the organisation does. Recommendations within these kind of reports should flow through to things like the organisational aspect of our strategic assessment. Operational side of the house will pay serious attention to that, but we're trying to move away from the very arguably siloed approach. Recommendations are just given and then they are taken off and managed, and we'll track and audit whether things are happening or not. There's a bit of a push as well to our scrutineers, and I'm encouraged at least that the discussions with BDO, with HMI, are more robust, a bit more challenging, but equally they're very supportive of us trying to close and perhaps not reaching 100% absolute fulfillment, but showing some flexibility about what's achievable given some of the dependencies that we face. So there are no excuses. This is not a good report, but a complete commitment to make sure that the system is properly robust. And that's the set, if you like, the reset that I've given to the team. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. Okay, I think this enables us to move on to the next agenda item, and that is 3.3, and that is the external audit progress report. And I think John Brown, we've got you speaking to that.
Thanks, Chair. Morning, everybody. This is just a short external audit sector progress update paper. We've completed the audit planning work that we said we would do. There's not been any changes to our risk assessment at this stage from what was presented in the audit plan, and we're on track and agreed key milestones around the financial statements audit, which will allow us to bring to the September meeting of this committee and then obviously the board the financial statements through to signing. So there's no matters arising from our planning work that I need to bring your attention to. The rest of the paper is just a sort of short sector update, which just captures key publications, including some Audit Scotland publications, as well as just a wee summary again of the best value and the action plan arising there, just for members' interest more than anything else, just to flag awareness. But that was all I wanted to say, Chair, in terms of the paper. I'm happy to pick up any questions any members have.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Jo. I see, Brian, you've got a question.
The question may be for Joy, maybe for officers. On page 8, there's a frame change to the valuation periods or approach to land and buildings. Are there any implications practically for the SPA on this? Is there any change into what we're going to be doing?
Who'd like to come in? Angelo and Sarah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Is that in reference to the intangible assets or the update with regards to indexation, Brian?
It's the change in terms of buildings are no longer required to undertake annual full revaluations of land and buildings. There can be a rolling basis or indexation intervening periods.
That's right. Yeah, that is going to have an impact. As previously, we were kind of aiming for 20%, if you like, on an annual basis, on that rolling basis, achieving the 100% revaluation over the 5 years. As it would work out, we were often much higher than that 20% on an annual basis, and the rest of it, if you like, would be left. And this is something that we've been talking about and negotiating with auditors really since Grant Thornton started 4 years ago. I think Grant Thornton's view was that we should be indexing, and the view of our estates department was that our estate, as it was probably not, doesn't necessarily lend itself to the indexation process. But this has now essentially been mandated by the update in the frame, and we are working with Graham and Sibbald as our external valuers to ensure that we're now applying that indexation to all of the assets that do not undergo a revaluation in year, Brian. So that's something we're alive to, working with Graham and Sibbald on, and will kind of feature as a change, if you like, in the 25-26 PPE valuation process.
Yeah, so helpful, Brian. Yeah, I see Brian nodding. Thank you so much, Angelo. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, Any other comments or questions on this agenda item? No, I see none. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Joe, for the report. Thank you. Okay, this enables us to move on to section 4, which is around assurance reporting. And we have got 4.1, which is the HMICS scrutiny plan, and I've got Craig Naylors down as speaking to this. Craig, do we have you with us?
Yes, good morning, Chair. I hope you're well. I'll leave the report as read, but I'll give you some very brief highlights of where we are. We launched our current 3-year scrutiny plan a year past April, and this is just an update on the back of what we've been asked to do and how things have changed over the last year. Our scrutiny plan is very much consulted on quite widely ahead of time, and we published it just over a year ago. During that period of time, we have, as Police Scotland know well, and the SPA know as well, we have been pretty busy. We have done Forth Valley, Highlands and Islands and joint custody progress inspections of Argyll and Western Bartonshire. We are about to publish one on Edinburgh and a review of recommendations on the other custody reports that we've done. We continue to inspect with Care Inspectorate, Healthcare Improvement Scotland and HMIE on children, services for children and young people. But the adult support and protection work that we were previously doing has stopped as of a year ago just now when the funding ran out. We are still waiting for Scottish Government to give us a view on what they would like us to do in that space going forward. In September last year, we published a frontline focus review of tools of the trade, which is very much looking at the experience of officers and staff on their uniform, on their equipment, on their IT. And then we also did work on the police response to drug harm reduction, which was published in December last year. You've already mentioned the joint best value audit of policing in Scotland, so I won't go into that space, and I know you'll be speaking about it in the next agenda item. And then most recently we published the citing witnesses in the Sheriff Court with the Prosecution Inspectorate, something that ties in very clearly with the work done across a whole number of partners in improving summary justice in Scotland. So we've taken stock of where we are. You'll be aware that we were asked to do a piece of work by government along with the Healthcare Improvement Scotland Care Inspectorate and HMIE on the national review of group-based child sexual abuse and exploitation. John Patterson, who's on this call, is leading that on my behalf for us as an organisation. And we are progressing through phase 1 of that with a view to publishing a report on that in the end of August, beginning of September. We're currently designing phase 2 of that, which will be more looking at individual local authority areas and how they are delivering against the threat of group-based child sexual abuse, exploitation and criminal exploitation. We're also due to publish very shortly the conduct and discipline review and a review of the Commonwealth Games preparedness that we have been doing. We are kicking off, as we speak, a crime audit, which is something that we do on a fairly regular basis. This one has been delayed due to the implementation of the core operating system by Police Scotland about 18 months ago. And we will be running that between now and the end of the year. We're also going to be doing some work on violence, with a particular focus on violence against women and girls. And then later in the year, we'll look at sexual offender policing units. That's not easy for me to say. So that is the plan at the moment. We will again do an update on this plan at the end of March next year to give a view of what we'll do in the 3rd year of the cycle. Chair, as I say, a very brief run through and very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Greg. This is really, really helpful, always really, really welcome. So thank you for that. Thank you for the report and the voiceover. Are there any questions for Craig at this stage? Angela, please.
Good morning, Craig, and thanks for the report. I've got a couple of questions. Throughout the audits and the reports, there is reference to continuous learning and development, and it's obviously been a theme of the discussions of the committee so far. I just wondered whether, from your observations, you're seeing that that culture changing, how Police Scotland are taking on board some of these issues and making sure that learning in one report, one audit, is then being transferred to similar areas and in other parts of the service. And my second one you've touched on was the child sexual abuse audit that you're doing. I just wondered whether, given how important this is and how topical it is, I just wondered whether some of the issues that are coming out of phase one, there was anything that you could say on that. And in particular, I was interested in data sharing, whether there was anything on the progress that was being made by partners in relation to that, because again, in many cases where there has been an issue, a crisis, it's been that breakdown in data sharing that has contributed to the issues that police and other partners have had to deal with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Two very good questions. So I will go to the sort of shared learning across Police Scotland, the SPA and Forensic Services. We did a lot of work with SPA and Forensic Services over the last couple of years, and we really see that they've improved considerably in that period of time in terms of understanding how they make improvements as they go, the sort of continuous learning and improvement. With some of the stuff that Police Scotland have done, we've seen exceptional changes in that space. So the work around best value was very good, and there was ongoing learning and development as that progressed. Likewise, with work we did with Police Scotland on missing persons, that was exceptional. The missing persons unit and the report on that was very, very good. And yet within the same area of business, policing together, the response to drug harm reduction has not been as positive, I would say, in that space. So I think a lot of it comes down to individual leadership, and we've talked about this earlier on, and listened to your conversations on that, and the cultural issue, you know, in some places, as I say, exceptional, very good. In some areas, it could be significantly better. And I know that Tom has got his eyes very much focused on that. We've had conversations about that in recent weeks about how do we make that more consistent. I think I did hear talk earlier on about we're not looking for perfection. We are not expecting 100% on absolutely everything, and we're pragmatic about it. So where there are recommendations that we can see that there's been significant effort and improvement made, we're happy to close it off before we get to 100% if that's appropriate to do so. So if the value of the investment of the last 10 or 15% would be astronomical and not effective, then we're happy to have conversations and be very pragmatic in that approach. To turn then to CSAE and phase one, we're in the very early stages of the data return. So there's two elements of the data return. One is the information that we asked from 32 local authority areas, and the second part of that is the self-evaluation. We only got the self-evaluation back last week, so it would be too early to say anything. I'll maybe ask John to make some comments on this, recognising he's just back from a couple of weeks' leave, so he's probably not fully over the top of it yet. We are waiting to understand exactly what we found, and we've not had those conversations yet with the team that are doing the analysis of the data that we've got. In terms of our concerns about data sharing and data usage, yes, we have the same concerns that you have, that there are vast arrays of data out there that they're maybe not shared as effectively as they could be, and there's certainly no one system that would cover every aspect. For example, initial referral discussions and case conferences are done in different ways almost 32 times across Scotland, which to our view is not something that is long-term sustainable. The benefit that Police Scotland have is they've got a vulnerable persons database, so they should have one repository of the information that they can use. But as I say, we are now looking at what we've got back from the 32 local authority areas, the 30 chief officer groups, and how they've responded to the questions we've asked them.
Thank you. Angela?
Thank you, Craig. That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, both. Pauline, please.
thanks, Craig, for your report and all the work you and your team are doing. In terms of the overarching 3-year plan, I know there was some intention to do some work around local policing. And as you know, Police Scotland are undertaking a massive change programme around enhancing community policing, and there's very much a kind of a learning approach, continuous learning approach to that as we move from area to area, and making sure it fits with local needs as well. So I'm just wondering how HMICS is going to kind of input, and when you think is the right time to support that work.
That's a very good point, and if we've not been as clear in this report, but we would see that as year 3 of our scrutiny plan. So we are still intent on doing it. It will be very much focused on community-based policing. So what is being done, what of the learning experience has been in Forth Valley and in the Highlands and Islands in terms of implementing the new model? How is that then being rolled out? And then sort of picking up thematic issues like antisocial behaviour, which was a subject of a report by the Scottish Government panel last year. And how is that actually being delivered? Recognising that antisocial behaviour and community-based policing is not all about policing, it's about partnership, it's about collaboration, and are all the partners involved in these meeting their both statutory obligations. And I would suggest that that is not the case in many local authority areas just now. I think there's only one published antisocial behaviour strategy in Scotland from the Scottish Borders Council. That is a requirement under legislation from about 2003. So how do Police Scotland play into a field that is not being pushed forward by many other organisations? And that is something that we'll be looking at when we do that piece of work next year.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pauline, for the question, Craig, for the answer. That's really good to explore that. So that's a good reassurance that you can maintain that focus as well on local policing. Are there any other questions or comments? And obviously we heard earlier from John as well, Craig, just in terms of your approach to recommendations, and you know the fact that you're shifting your approach, and it's much more collaborative, working together with Police Scotland just to ensure that what's being progressed is proportionate, appropriate, and the timeframes are realistic as well. So I think that was really quite helpful for us to have that input. So thank you for that. Okay. I see no further comments or questions, so thank you. And this enables us to move on to the next agenda item, which is 4.2, and that's Best Value Improvement Plan. I've got Mark talking to us on behalf of Tom, is that right?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Mark.
Hi, morning, everyone. Although I'm introducing this paper, I just want to point out that what's being presented is a jointly owned policing-wide best value improvement plan. And by way of introduction, I only want to highlight a few points. So firstly, we fully accept the findings of the best value report. They're largely a positive assessment of policing. They highlight clearly that we've got lots of strengths, but as would be expected, there are areas in which we can improve. And by and large, those are the areas that we had already identified in our collective self-assessments that we carried out in advance of the audit. And that was acknowledged by the audit team in their positive assessment of our self-awareness. I think it's actually important to set the audit findings in context. As outlined, many of the areas that have been identified for improvement are not specific to policing. So issues such as better strategic workforce planning, delivering transformation more effectively, and demonstrating financial sustainability through medium-term financial planning, they're consistently reported in audits as being challenging areas for improvement across the public sector. But we recognise that having a coordinated strategic workforce plan, medium-term financial plan, and transformation plan will put us in a stronger position in future for making cases for resourcing, to better determine the workforce that we need to address the threats, harms, and risks that we face, and to create a thriving workforce. We also recognise the benefits that can be generated from a much more effective approach to organisational learning. So the audit has set us some specific timescales for delivering our improvements. We're committed to driving continuous improvement, and we've already started progressing actions to address many of the recommendations. But we know some of the timescales may still prove challenging for us. To follow on from previous points that were made on agenda items, we have assigned senior accountability for individual improvement actions. And I know improvement owners will be inevitably reporting on progress to other committees, but our intention is to keep this committee updated on progress across the plan as part of our regular update reporting on significant audit and inspection recommendations. That's pretty much all I wanted to say by way of introduction, so welcome any questions and observations that the committee has.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. John, did you want to come in as well, or do I just go straight into questions?
Yeah, I think straight to questions. I think, like Mark said, we've taken a lot of heat from John Patterson, HMICS comments that this is a policing report and findings, and so our response is a joint policing effort. So we've worked very closely with Mark on behalf of Forensics and SPA Corporate to give you a single combined plan.
Yeah, no, thank you, John. And that collaborative approach, may I say, is very much appreciated, particularly also from a committee's perspective. So fully appreciate that. Okay, I think I had Pauline and then Angela, please.
Thanks very much, and I welcome that comprehensive report from policing, SPA and forensics, given that it was a comprehensive audit across all three bodies as well. I guess my question is perhaps more for HMICS and auditors in terms of, are these responses and these improvements that are proposed, are they going to hit the mark in terms of discharging the recommendations that were developed throughout the process of the audit and the report? And I'd be keen to explore your point further about the timescales. I recognise that they're challenging. I mean, some are only kind of a next month and the month after. I'm kind of attracted obviously to the medium-term financial plan, which is obviously something Resources Committee is taking a keen interest in. So keen to get views as to whether those timelines are realistic, and what needs to happen in order to achieve them over the course of the coming weeks. And then just a very specific point in terms of the action plan around 5C, which was about the link between workforce plans and medium-term financial plans, and there's an action to ensure a suitable review cycle between the two. I would suggest that that needs to be at least annually to fit in with the budget cycle that we do on an annual basis. So probably want that to be articulated more strongly in the action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. I see, John, you've got your hand up. John Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. A short answer to Pauline's questions. If what's in the plan is delivered, then we foresee the recommendations being discharged. But I'd like to start just firstly by acknowledging the work done by Tom, Mark, John McNellis and Sam in bringing this together in the first place. It's no mean feat, and I worked along with all of the individuals there to help shape the plan. Just come back to what I mentioned earlier, Chair, about the approach from HMI. I think it's also worth highlighting the work done by Sarah Ruffhead and Donna Valance since they've come in around medium-term financial planning and the estates work. The real important part for that is it is pan-policing rather than just being in Police Scotland, so that's refreshing to see. The timescales, Pauline, they are challenging, but mindful that we've been having the discussions with policing bodies since November last year, so there was no surprises when the report was published in late January. They are deliberately challenging, as you say, to fall in with cycles. Hopefully they will be achievable, but we will keep a ready connection with Mark and the team, because I'm going to lead on this on behalf of HMI and Audit Scotland on the delivery of the recommendations. And I'm sure that there'll be quarterly updates, as there have been in the past, back to this committee and others on their progress. And going back to my earlier point, we would be more than happy to meet with the committee and talk about progress separately, if that's something, Chair, that you were content with. Hopefully that answers your questions, Polly. I know Craig's maybe wanting to come in, but whether or not Angela's wanting to come in first.
Thank you. Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. Craig, did you want to come in on this point specifically? Angela, so with your forbearance, I'll bring Craig in.
Thank you, Chair. I'd absolutely echo John's comments. The work that's been done across the three organisations has been very effective to deliver what looks like a challenging but deliverable plan. I know that our colleagues in HMIC FRS are very interested in this piece of work and how Police Scotland are responding to it, especially as the National Audit Office in England and Wales are also looking at value for money, as they call it, rather than best value across England and Wales. We did give an update to HMIC FRS previously, and also to the reform team from the Home Office and the Metropolitan Police, who are looking at reform in England and Wales, and gave some inputs recently to Lord Bernard Hogan-Howe and his team when they were up visiting Police Scotland. So you've caught the attention of a number of bodies south of the border in terms of how the report has gone, but also how things have progressed as a reform journey over the last 12 or 13 years. So I think there's lots to be said that's very positive. There's challenging timescales, there's challenging pieces of work that, to be honest, are not easy. So defining a strategic workforce plan and medium-term financial plan that speak to each other is something that we've been keen to see for a long period of time. And the work that's been done on it, we're really keen to support and to help develop, but recognise the challenge that is. No one's done it effectively in policing across the UK. So if you can do it, you can probably bottle it and sell it for lots of money, hopefully. And maybe that'll help save this budget. Thank you.
The pressure is on and the opportunities are clear. Thank you for that, Craig. Sarah, I'll bring in Angela, so hold the thought. Angela, please.
Thank you. Yeah, and thanks, Mark. I do appreciate that you pulled this report together on behalf of all the organisations, and it is a mammoth task. But first of all, the best value audit was a big success. I mean, I know that we recognise that there were improvements to be made, but that's inevitable in any organisation. It's an ongoing issue, isn't it? So I think that there's a lot to celebrate given the scale of the organisations that we're talking about in particular. So we need to recognise the success there. I do have a couple of questions on the paper. I think you set out at the beginning, I'll just run through them quickly, and then there'll be a variety of people that probably want to come back. You mentioned the timelines, and I know that it is quite unusual for both HMICS and Audit Scotland to put, well, less so Audit Scotland, but to put timescales on it, and that some of these are challenging. I just wondered which ones in particular you feel are challenging, and I just want to flag that so that there's a bit of expectation management on behalf of the committee. I also just wanted to recognise what you were saying about self-assessment, that a lot of this isn't a surprise to us because it did come out through the self-assessment, which is great. So hopefully we've got a head start on some of them, as you've rightly said. So the challenges are maybe not quite as onerous as they might otherwise have been. I've got a particular question on continuous improvement because it has been a focus of our discussions, not just at this committee, but previously, and I think it's in recommendation 7. The self-assessment that was flagged, it's proposed that it comes back to ARAC during 2027. So there's no specific date to that. And I do wonder whether we could have a bit more information on that sooner than some point in 27, given that this is May 26, or maybe you can just expand on why you think that that's reasonable. It might be one of these dates that is, or one of the issues that is quite challenging. But I do think that it underpins this whole cultural aspect that we've been discussing is really, really key to the success of the strategic plan and the vision of the Chief Constable. My other question is the strategic policing plan, and I specifically wondered what the engagement process would be for that, the stakeholder engagement and how we might plan for that. I'll pause there. I've got another few, but I'll pause there.
Thank you, Angela.
Thanks, Angela. I'll come back in on some of them. I might ask colleagues to help out on some of the engagement around the policing plan. In terms of the timescales, which might prove challenging, it's really around getting to where we want to be with some of those big strategic issues. So although we're making steps in things like strategic workforce planning, it's how we actually get that to the level we want it to be, how we get it coordinated effectively with our medium-term financial plan, and to dovetail with things like transformation. That's going to be an iterative process. It's not something that's going to happen immediately. I mean, Craig touched on that earlier. So there'll be a series of steps before we really get to where we want to be. So we will be doing everything in our power to get to where we can within the time frame outlined, but we know beyond that there will still be things that we'll want to refine. A bit like organisational learning, we've been doing a bit of research and benchmarking on how we develop our approach to organisational learning. That is something that will be growing organically, and whilst we'll be able to develop our framework and start putting in some processes, that will take time to evolve and develop right throughout policing, and to really start to try and change the culture is not something we're going to do within 6 months. We will put the building blocks in place, but actually being able to get to where we want to be will be a much longer term ask than the time frame set out in the plan. In terms of continuous improvement and self-evaluation, I'll maybe also get John to come in on that. We have worked collectively across SPA and Forensics and Police Scotland to look at how we can get a coordinated approach to self-evaluation, and we've got something there that's almost ready to go. Just needs some further refinement. And what we're looking at is what we can implement this year, and then how we can get back into a reporting cycle to this committee. And the way we see it is by the time we do a bit of work, that's going to be next year before we get a sort of headline evaluation against what new framework we put in place. So that's why it's not going to be reported within this current year, because there'll be a lot of work ongoing through the year with the report coming either towards the end of this financial year or into next financial year. John, do you want to add anything on that? Sorry, Chris, I know you've got your hand up.
No, I think you've covered it, and what we're proposing is to bring to the next ARC committee our kind of way forward for best value and continuous improvement, where we'd outline to you in a bit more detail the approach we're planning on taking, and largely that's going to dovetail, be an evolution for what the SPA did in the past, and a bit of a combination of what worked well across all of policing. So I think that to the next committee in August will give you a bit more assurance over where we're going.
Yeah, thank you, Mark and John. And I think that's a really good suggestion, John. Just getting that approach to best value in front of the committee. I saw Angela nodding as well, so I know it will have support. Chris, you wanted to come in, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to address Angela's question on the strategic police plan. So the SPP has now been laid in Parliament. So to that extent, that part of that recommendation has been completed. I suppose the next bit is the consequence on the supporting strategies across Police Scotland, Forensic Services and SPA Corporate, and how these can better align, both in terms of content and timing. The SPP was authored in a way that ensured that existing strategies were complementary to the SPP. So from a content standpoint, I hope we've largely achieved that. In terms of timing, superficially, it looks like everything's all over the place, right? But actually, as a result of the next phase of Police Scotland's business plan in support of the vision, that will take us up to 2030. The existing Forensic Services strategy, which was only finalised last year, will also take us up to 2030. And finally, and I'll come on to this under my item later on, the SPA's corporate strategy is going to be refreshed this year and will also take us up to 2030. So we're in a position where I think certainly the timing can be aligned quite neatly. One caveat is the Scottish Government's strategic policing priorities may potentially change during this current parliamentary session. And if they do, there's a mandatory requirement to review the strategic police plan and, of course, consider the impact that might have on the supporting strategies as well. So it feels like we are tending towards quite a good place on this, but always under review, and we wouldn't consider recommendation 1B closed, obviously, without discussing this fully with HMICS and Audit Scotland. I don't know if anybody from Police Scotland, for example, Tom, wanted to come in this one.
Thank you, Chris. I'll bring Tom in and then John.
Thanks, Chair. Only to add to what Chris has said, the recommendation from the Best Value report offers us some leverage to frankly implement what the Chief has talked about for a while, about simplifying the strategic planning landscape. But a lot of enabler strategies, as they've been described, actually SPA's development of this most recently published strategic police plan gives us a reference point. We've obviously got the 2030 vision. That all of that work is now flowing through into things like the performance framework that we'll be talking to Performance Committee about in the weeks ahead. So things are joining up, but the desire to simplify the landscape is actually where we're going, rather than we kind of tweak at the edges of some of these existing strategies within the space. We need to focus on delivery and implementation. That's the bottom line, and we've got a clear direction between the vision and the SPP. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. And John?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick points. Picking up on what Angela's saying around continuous improvement, it was remiss of me not to mention earlier the work that Craig's been leading through the Scottish Public Sector Scrutiny Network. So in that sense, that the public sector scrutiny bodies are using Best Value as a foundation upon which to build future joint inspection work. And separately, I meet along with John and Claire around BDO's work to make sure that there's not duplication, but more importantly, there's not gaps. I think that the scrutiny inspection bodies need to work together to identify key issues that can drive system-wide improvement, as we've seen here across policing, but where does that segue into wider public sector? Given we've got a new parliament and soon to be a new government, the stated intention around public sector reform, I think it's really important if you look at Best Value in its wider sense here, and how you can use that to demonstrate improvement, because I think it's entirely foreseeable that come the next round of pre-budget scrutiny, questions will be asked around medium-term financial planning and strategic workforce planning, which are fair questions. Hence, some of the more challenging timescales, which is to support that work that Sarah and the wider team will do. So I think it was just important to say that we're also looking at the benefits of Best Value and how we can drive better coordinated audit and inspection across the public sector to make sure that there is that join up, because there is a lot of handoffs to other public sector bodies. Mental health and other areas are just ones that come to mind. But what is the system-wide approach to this so that we can deliver better reports? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, John. Angela, does that cover your array
Yeah,
of
that's
questions?
great, and it's hugely reassuring. Thanks to Mark for the his update and others. And I was really reassured just to hear about the iterative process, because I do think that the strategic workforce plan in particular is just a reflection of what the needs at a point in time, and these things will change given circumstances. And Chris has already mentioned the new government coming in, so who knows what the priorities might be, or whether they stay the same. So that organic move is really welcomed. I think that my only suggestion might be that we have more milestones, but John's covered the fact that there's going to be a paper coming to the next ARAC, which that might address it. And I suppose my only other thought on this was the part of the best value feedback recommendations was on governance, our own governance, and just to reflect the fact that not everything will come back here, but there'll be key aspects, as Pauline said, the finance areas will go back to resources, the strategic workforce plan and the likes will go to people, performance will go to performance. So I think an acknowledgement that there are different parts of the governance structure that will pick up the detail of much of this this work, but well done, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. John?
Thank you. I just wanted to go back to Pauline's questions, just to give you some answers to the points you raised. On medium-term financial plan, the timescales in there is very much what we're working to. We've had discussions with the finance team, so that's in train. I think we're planning on having a discussion at the Resources Committee Development Day to give you a bit more information on medium-term financial plan. And on 5C, quite an interesting one. Forensics were a little bit further ahead on their workforce plan. They've done work with Skills for Justice to come up with a workforce plan which was looked on quite favourably by HMICS. So I think very much there's a model there where they'll be able to pilot doing a bit more, linking the financial plan with the workforce plan that they've got. It's allowing them very much to doing a bit more scenarios. So there's potentially a route in there which I'm starting to explore with finance about using that as a route to see how you could link them a little bit better. I think that will be interesting, and very much it's what we've seen before with some of the best value work. If we can pilot in some smaller areas, it might be some learning that we could bring to the wider process.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. That was really helpful. And Sarah, I'm really conscious I didn't bring you in earlier. I didn't know if there is anything you wanted to add.
It was to cover the point that's being covered in terms of medium-term financial planning. We are already doing that. We are very conscious that we are planning to bring that to Resources Committee and then board in September. So we were conscious that year one needs to absolutely align with our bid for next year's funding from government, and also conscious that we've not heard from SG, but there may be a review in terms of Scottish Government's medium-term financial plans with the new government in place. So we need to link into that. And it was that very point that we've covered in terms of strategic workforce planning will not be completed by then. So it will be iterative. So we will be looking at our transformation programs over the next 5 years. We will be looking at our broader resource needs, but it won't be tailored as such into that workforce planning, which will come afterwards. But I expect our medium-term financial plan will absolutely be iterative, and I would hope that it becomes an appendix or part of that annual policing plan every year, so at the beginning of the year we've updated it, we've reflected it for what's coming over the hill. So just to reassure you on that.
Okay, no, thank you for that. Thank you, Sarah. And just to echo what my colleague already said, well done. I think this is the improvement plan, but it's I think we all acknowledge that everything is being done from a very strong starting point. So so really quite a good discussion, good reassurance around this. Thank you so much for this. Okay, I see no further questions or comments. So this enables us to move on to 4.3, and that is the integrated assurance statement for 2025-26. I think, John, you're talking to this.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Again, some members will have seen this in previous years, new to some others. purpose of this piece of work is really one of our year-end exercises that really brings together all the different assurances that exist across policing, across the authority, in one single place, which can provide you with an opinion on all those different assurances that will inform the annual report and accounts. It also brings a bit of a spotlight on some of those first and second line areas of defence, which we don't always see at the ARAC, but very much important areas of insurance and part of our systems of internal controls. So again, at that kind of strategic level, what this is telling you is that there are reasonable systems of internal controls across the authority, but several areas where there are improvements required. We've already talked about internal audit in particular, and from some of the certificate of assurance work, there are some issues that are being highlighted, rightly so, in areas such as estates data management, our financial management system, the service that we receive from the Scottish Public Pensions Agency, as well as our scope system. And those areas will be highlighted in the annual report and accounts as areas for improvement which we need to work on. The second part of our appendix brings together some of the planned assurance areas for the current financial year. And again, John from HMICS mentioned this earlier, that we work with HMICS and internal audit at the planning stage, as well as using this assurance framework to see where we can best use the limited time that we've got to target our assurance activities at the highest risk, as well as making sure we've got cyclical assurance of some of our key areas over the year. And that gives you an overview of how we've done that planning, and we keep this informed, bringing back to the annual opinion at the year end, which you've got as well. So those are the key points just to highlight to members, and again, happy to take questions.
Thank you, John. I always find this a really useful snapshot, really useful, everything pulled together as you've just explained. Are there any questions or comments on this document? No, I see none. I think it's quite self-explanatory, so thank you for doing that, John. Okay, so moving on to 4.4, which is the SPA Corporate 2025-26 year-end performance. And I believe, Chris, you're talking to this?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll be very brief on this one. I alluded to some of this earlier on. This is our third year of reporting against the SPA's current corporate strategy. We do this every quarter, and we're now in a position where we have a year-end report. So probably page 6 of the report is key for this one, which shows that at the end of the year we had achieved 86% of the milestones that we had set ourselves in our annual delivery plan. So that's 14% that are being effectively what 1% was closed. Another 13% have been rephased into this year's plan. If I were to summarise very quickly the root cause of any delays that we've encountered during the year, two things. First is resourcing. We're going through a mild restructure at the moment, which means that we're holding open a number of vacancies that we won't be able to fill until this financial year. And probably more significantly, we do have some inbound dependencies, many of which are outside of our control, which have an impact on milestone delivery. No particular areas of concern. Everything that's needed to be reprofiled into this financial year has been, and 86% delivery is fairly consistent with the last couple of years, which is also in the report too. Finally, just to say, in line with something I mentioned earlier to Angela about our corporate strategy, we are extending its lifetime by an additional year to allow us to refresh that during this year. And the reason we're doing that is we have prioritised the completion of the strategic police plan, and it was a conscious choice to sequence our own refresh of our corporate strategy after that, and that's something that's in progress just now. So on that, Chair, I was just going to leave it there and take any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any comments or questions from members on this agenda item? I see none. I mean, I do think it is reasonably, it's self-explanatory, and it's good to understand that. And again, I do note to hit hit 86% of sort of milestones in a year is pretty good. It is good. I think it is good. It's a good progress. You know, the question that always arises: are you being too easy? Is the task too easy? Is the bar set too low? Should there be more of a stretch, or are you just very, very efficient? So you know, I'm not saying I would want to see that percentage number drop, but you know, I would just like to acknowledge it. It's good that you've managed to achieve this much progress. And that's despite...
Catherine, I certainly couldn't look you in the eye if we had 100% delivery. So I think I think we do set ourselves some fairly stretching goals, and I suppose the most important thing is that we're into a fairly established rhythm of doing this, and we now, and especially once we refresh the strategy, we'll have a very clear link right from the top, being the strategic police plan, through our own corporate strategy to our delivery plan down to personal objectives as well, and I guess across the whole system. That's what we're trying to achieve in line with the best value report. So I think I'm fairly pleased with how this is going, but every year I think we try and challenge ourselves a bit more, for sure.
Good. No doubt about that. That's good. Thank you for that. Okay, I'm happy to move on to the next agenda item, and that is 4.5, the evaluation of committee effectiveness. Karen, I believe you will just introduce that for us.
Yes, Chair, thanks. So members will recall that they considered their own effectiveness at the last meeting back in February, and this is linked to the next item today on the committee annual report. So the other committees had the same public reporting over February and March, and all signed off their assurance reporting. So this report presented today is a collection of the overall output. So in summary, the overall results were positive, indicating committee effectiveness has either improved or was similar to last year's results. There were no areas that witnessed an overall decline. Stakeholder feedback was again invited this year, and the number of responses had increased. Each committee had at least one stakeholder providing feedback and insights, and again, results were positive. Learning has been identified for individual committees, and this will be considered through various streams such as development days, work plans, and the resetting of committee priorities. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. And I mean, as you've alluded to, we all will have seen some of these reports. They've all been discussed previously, sort of quite extensively as well. So it doesn't feel particularly new, but it's very, very helpful and a really important part of our annual assurance to have all of these pulled together in one report, and to have that assurance that our committees are operating effectively. So it's always helpful to see that all pulled together. Are there any questions from any members on any of these? Pauline, please.
Not so much a question, more a comment. Obviously, really good practice to do these annual assessments and to inform the work plans for the committees going forward as part of that continuous improvement cycle. I'm just conscious we do have the best value recommendation about the review of the governance arrangements to ensure there aren't any unnecessary areas of duplication, and we've got the BDO audit ongoing at the moment. So we probably, I would imagine, over kind of the next few months, just need to take cognizance of those two aspects into the committee work plans in terms of references. Those are reviewed in the coming months.
Thank you, Pauline. Yeah, very good point. And I'm sure colleagues absolutely have that on their radar. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. So I think this enables us to move on to 4.6, and that is the Audit, Risk and Assurance Committee Annual Report. John, you're introducing this one.
Thanks, Chair, and very much linked to the last report. This is really focused on the Scottish Government's Audit Committee handbook and the statutory role that the IRAC has. So confirming, has the IRAC discharged its role and remit over the financial year? Very much compared to the previous report, which was more focused on how well you're performing in your role. This is very much focused on, have we done everything that as an audit committee that we needed to do over the year and fulfilled your terms of reference? And that's really over to the committee for your own comments and feedback. We've really highlighted, in particular, the change of membership over the last year. And that's actually quite, I think, strengthened the committee's role again. We've got different skills now, which I think will really serve us well over the next year.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Again, as you say, important part of our assurance activity. Are there any questions or comments on this? Oh, and again, we don't need to prolong the discussion on this because it's very, very, very well explained. So thank you for that. Okay. So colleagues, I'm quite conscious we have been going for a while, but we've got only two more items to take in the public session. So maybe if we just press on with those, and then after that, I'll give everybody a wee break before we've got our private session as well. Okay, so 5.5, and that's accounting policies, judgments and estimates. And I've got both John and Angela down for this. I don't know who will be speaking, gentlemen, first. Introduce it.
Angela, lead on this one.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, John. Yeah, so I'll take us through this paper quite efficiently because it's a rather straightforward paper, and I believe it's the third year in a row that the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee has seen a paper similar to this one. The purpose of the paper has been to provide the proposed accounting policies, judgments and estimates prior to the preparation and approval of the SPA annual report and accounts for consideration by the members of this committee. Just in terms of a bit of background, it is best practice, and this is outlined in the Scottish Government's Audit Committee handbook, that the IRAC should consider significant accounting policies and any changes to them, and any significant estimates or judgments. And this essentially allows you guys an opportunity to review and become comfortable with prior to that, the main preparation of the accounts kind of going ahead on that basis. The full draft of the annual audit, the annual report and accounts will be provided for noting at this committee in August before the final version comes in September, as sort of noted by our external auditors earlier in the call. In terms of the preparation of the annual report and accounts, it's done so on the basis of the FREM, and the authority's accounting policies are quite specific principles, conventions and rules and practices that are applied in the production of that document. And these policies are actually disclosed within the document itself as part of Note 1 in the notes to the accounts, and it's also an appendix to this paper, Appendix A. And unless there's any major changes to the accounting rules or regulations, the accounting policies do not change significantly between years. And this is really important, actually, because this enables the accounts to be comparable from some sort of one year to the next. There are a few minor changes I'd just like to bring to the attention of the committee. And the first is at Note 1.3 to the financial statements, and it's in relation to segmental reporting. And this is just essentially an update to reflect how the divisions used in the monthly budget and management reports have been updated to reflect the change in the reporting structures year on year. And not much has really changed. There's just been a subtle sort of update to reflect the new reporting structures. And then in addition to that, the note at 1.5 actually overlaps with a question that was raised by Brian earlier on in the committee in relation to the latest guidance in the frame, touching on the revaluation basis for land and buildings and how we're now required to apply indices, essentially alongside those regular valuations. But really, other than that, there's no other proposed changes to the policies for this financial year. And then finally, just to kind of highlight some of the significant judgments and estimates which are required by management to kind of call out within the accounts. I suppose good examples of the significant judgments would include leases in terms of the IFRS 16 judgments around the terms of occupation, particularly for some of our leases that are on tacit, so it's not necessarily driven by a contract. And also provisions, just given the sort of materiality and volume of potential legal claims, we do really quite heavily rely on our legal colleagues to kind of give us an opinion and provide that judgment on the probability of an outcome that we then use to derive an amount or estimate an amount. And then in terms of the significant estimates, PPE, the economic useful life, and for example, is something that I think is generally understood to be an accounting estimate, and it's a very, very important one. An example, I suppose, of a judgment in that space would be whether or not we actually chose to capitalise something in the first instance, just in terms of trying to provide a bit of clarity around what is a judgment and what is an estimate, because the two can sometimes become confused. And then finally, pensions, of course, and this is based on a range of actuarial estimates and assumptions, and does feature rather heavily in the annual report and accounts. But I mean, other than that, I wasn't hoping to kind of call out anything else in addition to that, Chair, but happy to take any sort of questions on the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. Thank you. I see Brian, you'd like to come in, please.
I like the concept of the paper. It's a good idea, as it's been said, to let the ARIC members know about significant judgments, estimates before we get to the accounts. I'm not quite sure, if I'm honest, that the paper delivers what it says. I wasn't able to see what the significant judgments were. My rather lay understanding of police would be that one significant judgment should be the treatment of the pension funds, and it's not really brought out in this. I think the other aspect about it is that the estimates that need to be significant estimates, there might be some scope, I think, for some of the narrative in the accounting policies to be cut down. I mean, again, I'm not absolutely sure about this, but my understanding is that things like Jackson are no longer PFIs. So there's maybe not the need to disclose the accounting policy in the same way. I just think coming into this next year, it would be better if it was clearer about what our significant judgments are, what our significant estimates are, and actually thought about reducing some of the narrative where it's not actually significant to the accounts. So that would be a recommendation probably going forward into next year.
Thanks very much, Brian. Sorry if I just quickly come back in on that point, just very briefly, if that's okay, Chair. Yeah, I mean, good points well made. As a somewhat of a complex area, and I know that it's been sort of subject to our FRC review in recent years, I think as recent as 2022, and that did align with our new external auditors, Grant Thornton, coming in. And we did actually have quite a really good bit of constructive discussion with Grant Thornton over this, not in year one, and it did result in quite substantive changes. And at that point, Brian, we were kind of highlighting what makes one of these particular policies significant. And we were at one point of a view to really quite aggressively cutting it back, but then landed roughly where we are just now. But like I say, that was really robustly looked at in year one of the current cycle of Grant Thornton's audits, and we're now going into year 4, so maybe it does merit a bit of a closer look in terms of seeing if we can scale that back and also provide a bit more clarity around what is a significant judgment versus an estimate. Like I say, the two can get conflated rather easily, so I really appreciate that recommendation. We'd be keen to act on it moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Angela. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you for that. I see no further hands up on this agenda item, which enables us to move on to agenda item 6, and that is the committee work plan. It's got my name against it. I think it's reasonably self-explanatory. I wasn't really going to say much more other than see if there are any questions or any comments at this stage against the committee work plan. Again, it's the usual mix of cyclical, regular, ad hoc items as well. Don't see any questions or hands up, so I will take that as understood and agreed. Okay, so I think this enables us to finish this agenda item, and that is, as I indicated, I believe that is the last item on the public agenda. Public section of our agenda. So at this stage, it is 12:33. I would suggest that we stop the web streaming and we will all treat ourselves to a almost 15 minutes, a 12-minute comfort break. So maybe if we